Now, I've been talking about UCLA Extension courses since I started my channel.
I'm back to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing. Maybe like a month ago or 2 months ago, signed up for UCLA Extension Writing Program class, which was the 1-hour spec drama.
There wasn't much online about the classes that I wanted to attend or any reviews that talked about what it was like to be in the classes before you paid. And back then, screenwriting was really hard to find any information about people who were actively doing it, how it worked, classes that you could attend. And now there are so many amazing channels, but currently there's still a lack in screenwriting course information. And that's what actually led me to putting up my first YouTube video. This year, I finally graduated my certificate program for feature film writing, where I can finally give you a full overview on taking every class from my certificate program, and that is the base classes, Feature Film 1 to Feature Film 4. That's right, I want to tell you everything about my journey in the UCLA Extension Certificate Program and talk to you about how I wrote my neurodivergent rom-dram as a result of taking those classes. So let's get into it.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Now, welcome back to my channel, Scribes. If you're new here, I'm Pika Lee. I'm a writer and filmmaker. I teach you how to create your writer's process, how to trust your process, and I also try to demystify a few facts about the business of screenwriting and the entertainment industry. Let's talk about instructors, the biggest part of why I went to the UCLA Extension Program to begin with. Each one was actively working in or had worked in the industry, and they'd sold a screenplay, had it made and produced. And so that's where they get their writer's credits, enough to actually become a working writer who gets staffed into a position as an instructor at the UCLA Extension Program. So all of their advice was pretty unique to what has worked for them or how they currently work on their projects. I strongly suggest that if you want to know how I picked my instructors while I was there, you go check out my minisode on my channel. While you're there, feel free to subscribe just so that you can come back later and check out what other videos I have. In the minisode, I do take you through how I got access to their bios to make the decision of who might suit my writing style most. As a side note, of course, I just want to mention here, because I don't think I mentioned it on my minisode, but semester to semester, I did figure out that some instructors were not going to be my next, feature film. Oh, that was crazy. How did I catch that? Instructors are not always going to be in the second or the next course that you're supposed to be signed up to take. And so that meant that you would not always have the same instructor throughout all 4 of your courses with the program. Stay put, because I'm also going to be answering a few questions like why you should even bother taking these courses. So let's get into it. Feature Film 1. This class for me was actually remote, so it was taken over Zoom. My lady instructor was actually pretty great. I think it was maybe her first semester with UCLA. She was on the younger side. She was definitely not someone who was interested in the romance genre, but she was someone who did enjoy suspense in the way that I did, and she did enjoy drama. So she was interesting enough for me to be writing a romance drama with, because she actually opened my eyes to taking a little bit more risk when it came to how I approached a rom-dram. Let's be honest, I thought a rom-dram would be so easy to write. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to write enough pages and then do my rewrites accordingly. So I thought doing a rom-dram would be super simple, and I picked an idea that honestly was supposed to be a complete ripoff of If You Continued Leap Year. Fortunately now, my idea is completely unrecognizable to Leap Year, but if you know, you know. Honestly, because of her challenging the way that I created a rom-dram, I ended up changing my leads to become neurodivergent leads who fall in love of opposite divergencies. And I completely fell in love with the story much more after I did that. As you can see, I couldn't help myself, and I started to talk a little bit about this course and lectures. So, Feature Film 1, my remote class, our lady instructor did give us lots of visuals and major beats. We did watch a movie, and we had to read through the script of the movie and then talk about the major beats of that. So that was really fun to put into practice, figuring out what those major beats were by reading a 2-hour script. She explained a little bit more about the major beats. She explained what a beat sheet was. And of course, we ended up writing a treatment. A treatment is so important if you are writing scripts, because once you become professional, a lot of times they want you to write a treatment before you go into the actual writing stage. And this is just so they can read a prose version of your story, pretty much like an outline. You can use a beat sheet outline, or you can use the treatment, or you can use both to then create your full feature film script. Our homework was also to post our pages and then comment on different peers' work. So you did have to do some reading. I think it was about 2 people that you had to comment on. You could comment on more if you wanted to, which was actually pretty fun, and some of us actually did. This class, particularly, it was just the outline we were focusing on. She even had us write a few pages of our Act 1 just for fun. So basically, we got to read a script. We got a few pointers on what the basics of a script would look like. So the slug, the interior exterior is part of the slug and how that works, how to write the action dialogue, how to write the dialogue, and so forth. She told us to use pretty much any sort of writing software that we can get a hold of. It did not have to be Final Draft. Some people can't afford to do Final Draft immediately. Many people gave recommendations for the ones that they were currently using, whether that was Writer Duet, whether that was Highlander, or just various different ones that they were currently using. And that is what we used to write on. In Feature Film 2, when I started that one, I was maybe 1 or 2 semesters after, so I didn't do these consecutively back to back. I do kind of regret that a little bit, but my instructor was really fantastic. Now, Feature Film 2 was also remote. I did all of these remote because I didn't want to travel from Anaheim to all the way downtown LA because traffic is chaotic, and I wanted none of that. He actually really opened my eyes up to Act 1 and how to begin in Act 1, whether it's like a small movie within a movie, basically like a cold open to the world, different takes on how a beginning should be in Act 1 to introduce your feature film story. That was super incredible. I was really grateful for having him as my instructor, and he gave a lot of his experience, which was refreshing. I mean, straight from his own experiences recently. He was giving all of that background on how things currently work. This was actually even around the time when strikes were happening, and because there were writer strikes, we were asking him lots of questions about that. He gave such great insight, and he then could cater some of that towards our questions, which he took a lot of our questions during class. We were a super quiet, easy class for him, so we didn't talk much or interrupt him. We didn't have a lot of questions all the time. We were really just there ready to write. He talked a lot about his recent sales and how that worked, and it was just insight that I feel sometimes gets really gatekept even in the classroom. They're much weaker points for people who just start out in the industry, and having a classroom where we were getting a lot of answers during the class and not waiting till the end of the semester was actually really cool. I think that's something that a lot of screenwriters fail to recognize is how important it is to understand the business, and this is because they're usually a little bit more concerned with selling the first screenplay. In Feature Film 2, we were guided through Act 1, so we used our outline for our instructor to just take a look at, make sure all of our beats made sense, gave us feedback on that, and then from there we started to write in the next couple of weeks the first act. As you write your pages for the first act, they're also giving you lectures on what makes the first act. And then from there, every week, we would submit our pages publicly so that they could be peer reviewed by each of us. We had to get points by actually reviewing different pages from our peers and giving some comments and some feedbacks that were helpful feedback. And then we would read them during class different people would take different parts. They would be assigned these different parts by the different readers. If you turned up to class, you got yours read. If you did not turn up to class, he would read yours separately and then give you his comments. I think expect to do about 5 pages per week. There were definitely some people who wanted to continue writing. They were just so inspired that they continued to write past that. Even though he was giving me actual feedback on my pages, I still didn't have the sort of momentum to go up and ask, hey, what should I just not be focusing on? This was just literally a first draft. Don't get hung up on your first draft. Feature Film 3 was also remote. As I said, I did all of them remote now that I'm remembering that. This writer was actually a writer of some pretty amazing Ghibli adaptations. That kind of gives a lot away. I'm sorry, I just had to mention that because I was so excited about this. He was very encouraging, gave notes on every read that we did in class. We also did read everybody's pages in class. I had actually, being in that class reminded me that I was around so many great writers who were going to formally just train in the screenwriting portion of things. And they had fantastic stories, really interesting stories. And so definitely a really fun class. When we got to Feature Film 3, pretty much they split the second act into 2 parts. Feature Film 3, you would write the first 45 pages or so, and Feature Film 4, you would write the rest, plus the third act, and you would complete that off with a revision. When we started the course, they'd gotten a lot of feedback from lots of different writers because you're actually in a class full of beginner to somewhat intermediate writers. And because of that, it's a little bit more overwhelming to write the whole second act for very, very beginners. In course 3, Feature Film 3, we actually weren't submitting directly to all peers. We were just submitting our homework to the instructor himself, and then we would go into class. And during class, we would read everybody's scripts. They would be cast by the writer, but there were actually so many in particular in the third course that because he was a well-known writer and so many people were so excited about it, we couldn't actually do any feedback from the peers. During that class, you get limit of 15 students. His was completely packed and had all 15 students. I was quite lucky to actually get into his class, and I transferred out of a different instructor's class into his because I really, really wanted it. And then he would give us some notes. I think one of the things that some people weren't excited about was that there was no peer reviews because there wasn't enough time, because everybody's script got read aloud, and then he would give feedback to everybody individually, which was fantastic. Feature Film 4 was online as well. Here we go. Here's the twist I forgot about. Feature Film 4, I did completely online. That means that it was not self-paced necessarily, but everything was going to be lectures that were posted for you and instructions that were going to be given to you on Canvas. So strictly all Canvas work. There was one Zoom meeting at the end where she got to answer a bunch of questions. Typically, I don't like to do online versions, and this is because I am someone who likes to talk more with others and get more feedback or see how things work with other students. And this one was very much less peer sort of directed, and this was writing the fourth act, doing the rewrites. So at the time I was transitioning, I had some anxiety about reading my rom-dram out loud. Feature Film 4, though, I had a really great and encouraging instructor as well. She had been an actress before. She was a fellow, produced her own feature. So kind of a lot of things that she's played different roles in. She was very multi-hyphenate, which was really cool. She was very encouraging and aware, and she liked to encourage us to nurture our inner artist and create a space for peers that could discuss, how they feared certain parts of their writing. And so a lot of it was sort of practicing and discussing our next major beats in the third act, and then getting those pages out, and then also working on a lot of sort of side prompts that she would have for us for homework, which dealt with talking to your inner artist and your inner critic. really fun, very the artist way, which I think she referenced a few times. And she gave us a lot of great examples of different sort of movie clips that were also going to help us along with the next pages that we were writing. And I think I really needed that in that class, so I'm really glad that I did the online version with her. In feature film 4, since it was online, it was completely different. This was mostly lectures that were written every week and were released every week. You would go into those lectures, you would take a read, you would ask your questions if you needed to, and then you would do the homework that was actually based off of that lecture read. We would submit our pages and we would read the lectures, we would do our homework. Some of our homework had to be submitted publicly for peer comments. Once we started getting to the end of the quarter, we actually submitted our scripts, the full PDF, and we got assigned a partner that we were going to have to read their entire script as a peer and give feedback. I got back feedback from someone who was writing a holiday romance that was a little bit more adult for Netflix type of style, and that was really fun. And then I had a rom-drom. So we got to exchange feedback. I really enjoyed the feedback that I got. Some of the things that were brought up were valid and helped me think a little bit more so that I can get into the rewrite. Then our final finale project was basically incorporating at least 3 of those feedback points into our next draft and then submitting to our instructor for final review by our instructor, which gave us a little bit of a general critique on how we executed those changes. So now that I've talked about the instructors for each course, coursework, homework, and the lectures, what those were like, we're at the effort level. So all of the courses required at least 5 pages per week. So that is something to consider. This can be kind of difficult for writers who might be a little bit unfocused. They have a lot going on in their work week. And for young writers of less experience who don't know quite how to do a lot of the formatting in a screenplay. And when I say young writers, I do mean young as far as experience, not like age. I'd also like to include it might be a little difficult if you are neurodivergent. You are in a genre that might be a little bit complex and layered, lots of world building, because you've got a lot to set up in the outline. But if you are doing a complex or large genre that's like fantasy or something like that, sci-fi-ish, you might want to pre-prep before you get into the course by outlining some of that background stuff so that you've got it all lined up in your head really, really well, so you can execute it very quickly. You also might be having a little bit of struggles if you're much more of a perfectionist, and that is okay. But just remember, this is your 0 draft, your first draft of whatever it is you're coming into the class to actually complete. And so with that comes sometimes some messy chaos. As a note, it was very important that your pages were done before the deadline of class so that you can get timely feedback. Sometimes this meant that you might get no feedback if you didn't have it in on time. Late work could be handed in, but absolutely not encouraged, because not only do you have to write on deadline if you're going into the profession regardless, but you also do have to be dedicated to getting the pages in for feedback. The instructors absolutely understood also that everybody was at sort of a different level of writing, which is why sometimes they would allow and accept the late work and give you the points as long as you were actually trying and making an effort. When you start to get used to how many pages you've got to write, you'll understand how much time you need to write those pages. And that is part of sort of building your writer's process in general. And that's how I built my, what I call writer's foundation, which is just my writer's process. Now, peer review comments were absolutely necessary for the majority of the classes that I took. Be prepared to have to read other people's pages. That's going to take more time. Now, just some additional notes. You could send in whatever pages you had. Let's say you only did 2 pages and you wanted to submit the 2 pages. Those would be accepted. You could re-upload the day of class. It was okay for you to re-upload just something that may have been rewritten or update the amount of pages that you've actually put in for your grade. And so that was really great. This also meant if you were doing peer review from homework, you might not get any peer review if you are submitting past submission date. The homework load was quite light considering it was mostly just pages that you had to do for your own story and then submitting some peer review comments if that was required for your class and for your instructor. There were no tests. And as for my recommendation, I definitely say the day after or the night of the class, start working on your next pages. Keep ahead of those pages. Do not procrastinate them. You will not have a very good time trying to get out those words and get out those pages. Every single teacher gave a syllabus. I forgot if I started recording the audio again. Each teacher gives you a syllabus that's available to you to see ahead of which weeks we're going to have what homework assignments possibly available and ready to go and outlined for you. So if you looked at your syllabus, each instructor had one and it told you week by week what you were going to be learning and potentially also said your homework assignments, what pages, what beats you were going to be working on. So that was amazing. You can look at that and you can actually get ahead of the game, anticipate the struggle, and write it ahead of time. When I came into the classes, I didn't think that they took that much effort. To be fair, they don't take that much effort. But when you are a creative, it is a lot of brain space. Anticipate that brain space being used up. There's not a lot of people who can commit and be disciplined enough to do it, but don't worry, because I have faith in you. In hindsight, I would also jump in on those benefits before you get through all of the classes so that you can enjoy them while you're still taking the courses. You do get a percentage off if you submit to be a candidate for the certificate program ahead of time instead of waiting like I did and taking multiple courses and then basically by the fourth course submitting your candidacy. I think I only got one course that was percentage off, but it's pretty useful if you're going to continue going throughout all these classes. So I definitely recommend the benefit of it. With that, you also get a graduation, which is really cool. I got to participate in the graduation, and my family, while they couldn't be physically here, they all watched me because it is live streamed on their YouTube channel, which is really fun. It really did feel like I was having an official graduation from UCLA itself. Why should I take these courses? In my opinion, this was really great for neurodivergence because it was a classroom setting. Everybody was working towards a goal, so there's somewhat of a body doubling aspect to it. You can network with a lot of different writers. Some of the writers and I got together and we would do our homework during a certain time of the day on Zoom together, and that was really fun. I hosted a few of them, actually. It's great to have a physical instructor to actually be able to go into office hours and speak with and to actually have access to a writer who's currently in the industry. That's another really great reason why I think you should take a course like this if this is what you're looking for. I loved that it was limited to 15 students only so that you weren't overwhelming the instructor. Socially, if you live in LA, it's a really great program to either take on campus or to meet up with these writers and to definitely connect and network in that way. So definitely a networking opportunity. I also think that it gets you super used to writing on demand and writing on a deadline. Having to really write something that resonates with other peers and getting that feedback is fantastic. It's something that you typically don't have a lot of the time when you're just working on your own. Having to incorporate the feedback is also another skill set that you get to learn through this process. So really cool to actually learn some of these basic skills. But who are the courses for? I started my channel by posting pretty much my experience with UCLA Extension courses. Side note, because I did have a comment come in about screenwriting and UCLA Extension courses. This was definitely built for people a need to learn from sort of the ground up. The writer's foundation, if you will. Major plot points and beats and what they mean, how the structure works. So a lot of the beginner steps and somewhat intermediate steps to actually building your story and honing your voice. That's what I feel this program is great for. My learning style is much more hands-on. So for me, this was maybe going over some of the beginning things, but also getting that mentorship as I wrote each act over time. I was already involved in the industry, so I did know and have access to scripts, to people in the industry, but not to writers. Once I got to these courses, I was already sort of at the basic level of that, and also had already been talked into buying Final Draft when I was working minimum wage jobs. You can check out my unpopular opinion video about Final Draft being suggested to beginners. I do not recommend it usually for beginner writers who are not great with understanding story or developing story. If you are not selling your script quite yet, I don't think that you are ready for it. There are plenty of softwares that automatically format for you. They're much cheaper, or they're just plain free. Now, what was the pricing? So the pricing out of pocket currently is $720, and that's for just a standard class. It does range in price. Some of them might be a little bit cheaper. Some of them might be a little bit more expensive if you're looking outside of the courses that I personally took here today. If you're part of the writers program, which makes you a candidate for the feature film writing program, you actually get 10% off, which I utilize probably just once. I joined when I was pretty much done with all of the standalone courses that made up the certificate program, and that was because I wasn't sure when I would complete them. Now, were there additional benefits to doing the screenwriting program at UCLA Extension? And yes. I think my favorite thing about being part of this whole certificate program, the writers program, was that UCLA Extension treats you just like you're a graduate of UCLA. There's social and networking events that are constantly happening. I got invited to some speaker events through UCLA Extension Writers Program, which was really cool. Part of the writing certificate program, I do get to submit to an instructor of my choice my draft for notes. Because of how long this video kind of went, just talking about the courses, feature film writing 1 through 4, I'm definitely going to go ahead and make a separate video for the writing process that I went through and the development of my neurodivergent rom-drom that I did for this particular course, how much changed as a result of taking these courses. So don't forget to subscribe down below, like this video, let me know that you're excited to see some more about this whole process, and I thank you so much for being here with me, Scribes. I will see you on the next one.